listen to this soothing Eastern European voice. I love you. But if you're working in experimentation, just look at the product roadmap. That is where all your answers lie.
What's going on, certified homies? Welcome to another episode of From A to B. You have Shiva, and I'm joined by repeat guest Juliana Run the Jewels Jackson. Juliana, how are you doing?
I'm here wearing my famous festive wig. Her name is Penelope. And I just had to put my wig on for this special occasion to come here on From A to B and talk to you guys today.
All the podcast listeners will super appreciate your
exactly.
wig.
I look good. Listen, I look good. I look great on radio.
That's what people say, like, oh wow, you have a face for radio. It's like, bitch, you're ugly.
I have the face for radio right now. Come on.
No, Juliana, you are stunning. In Penelope, this is maybe one of my favorite wigs of yours. But we are not here to talk about your beautiful wigs. We're here to talk about better hypotheses. Before we get into that topic, Juliana, you're at Media Monks. You're an experimentation smart person at Media Monks. I think that's a fair description to say.
I try. Yeah.
All right, we'll just run with that. I try, a smart experimentation person at Media Monks, parentheses, I try is your title.
Pretty much, Monks. Yeah.
But very qualified in all things experimentation, product experimentation, CRO. The reason why I wanted to have you on for this episode was we were having an offline conversation and you pulled up something in your framework around hypotheses and you added some additional columns to that. I was like, oh, this is fucking great. There's so much cool shit that you put in your thought into building a hypothesis. And that's where I really want to go into this topic, which is most of y'all's hypotheses fucking suck. Juliana and I are going to be here to talk about how to make your hypotheses better. The first thing I want to go into is maybe what are some symptoms that your hypotheses suck? One of the biggest ones, I think, is people just look at your hypotheses, they look at your test ideas, they look at the data, and they're like, I don't think this is a good idea. I think that's probably the biggest one of your hypotheses aren't great, is when the overall test with the foundation of the hypothesis, you're just not generally getting buy-in for your tests.
In general, hypothesis should not be an idea that you have. It shouldn't be something that you just came up with today, like, why shouldn't we test a triple checkout? Like, hypotheses are not necessarily ideas. They're kind of like a projection of data, right? They should be a projection of some data that you're looking at. For sure, like, the biggest symptom is the stakeholder buy-in, but it's also the fact that the discovery, and I've been talking about this lately, like the discovery process when you onboard a new client and when you onboard a new program is very detached from the business itself, from the business context. It's kind of like focused so much on, like fast forward onboarding and processes and the system versus actually spending the time to understand how you can help that company. So I kind of like realized this when I was focusing more on data projects, when you were supposed to, fix different implementations or like create dashboards or stuff like this. And then we would set up the implementation for GA4, we create the dashboard, and the dashboard was just like super, straightforward. And then the client was potentially asking like, hey, but what do I do with this? Like, what are the insights? Why does this matter? Why should I look at this metric? And then you realize like, wow, if we would have spent the time during discovery to understand exactly what are the KPIs and the goals of these teams and what are they trying to achieve this quarter or the next, what's like the overall business goal. And then when I realized this, I was like, oh, so I guess it should be the same in CRO. So when I went to some emails that I shared with different stakeholders and people that I was working with, it was always around the same question, like, how did you come up with this test? Why should we test this? I don't know about this. This doesn't sound right. In the market, I've seen people do X, Y, and Z, or I talked to my colleague from accounting. I don't know, it's a stupid example, but it's kind of how these conversations happen. So I kind of always heard the question, why does this matter? I always come at it from a business perspective. This matters because if we test this and we find out what is the better way about fixing this user problem or about approaching this opportunity, then this is going to lead you to increase revenue or CLV or whatever, which is your goal for this quarter. So when you speak to people in those layman terms, it's easier for them to understand and it's kind of like making sense. It's like, you know what it is like, bro? It's just this moment of brilliance right now. Let's say you're applying for a product manager job. So you take your resume and you optimize the shit out of it to put product manager in every in every section. So then when you apply for the company for a job, their ATS system will check your resume and 1,000 others. And if you have the right keywords, it will show up to the hiring manager. If you don't, then it won't. So in general, with data and CRO, it's kind of the same shit. If you don't say the right words and position things in the right way, the stakeholders are not going to care because there's no keyword optimization.
Okay, so I'm going to pause for 2 seconds because I think you basically just did the whole podcast like on your own in like 7 minutes. And I'm like, I want to say something too, but you're off. And I'm like, no. Dude, I'm going to let you cook. Okay, so there were a couple things here that I want to start breaking out. What effectively you're saying is there are buzzwords that stakeholders are looking for in the test that will trigger feelings and spark feelings of joy, right? Like if they look for green text, they look for win. If they look for shit that's like, oh, it's good, it's win, it's learn, it's what we're doing next. Like there are some key buzzwords in the packet of the hypothesis or the test doc or something that stakeholders are looking for. So make sure you stuff everything you have with those things. I want to say like not necessarily stuff because that sounds negative, but it means like make sure you address those comments. Because if you have a test doc that's very functional and it's just like here's a hypothesis and it's fucking 3 sentences and it's just you just have a text thing. People like visuals, people like heat maps, people like colors. Make this thing more visually appealing. But I think that's on the test doc side, and I think that's valuable. Taking a couple steps back, let's go back to the hypothesis. You mentioned something like, why does this matter? If you think about we're trying to cook something, we're trying to cook up a test. What are the recipes that make for a good test? Onions, shallots, oil, chicken breast, I don't know. Like we need the ingredients to make a good hypothesis. The test results could still fuck up. You can still burn the chicken. But what are the ingredients in a good hypothesis? Let's start with the first one, the why it matters. Why it matters is business impact, right? Now let's double click business impact. Talk to me a little about what you include in your hypothesis to talk about the business impact.
Anything business impact is related to how well you do discovery. If you're an agency, even if you're working client side, like you're working in a company, how well do you fully understand the product plan or the roadmap or the development? If you don't spend enough time talking to the product manager or head of product, the developers, the UX person, the UI person, and get like a whole understanding of what's happening, they don't care about your test. Like it could be based on all the data in the world. And I can give you a practical example. So one of my clients in Europe, they have an app. It's very hard for me, even if I have, again, all the data and I come up with 3 tests because I think this is going to improve onboarding and reduce first day app uninstalls and whatever. If it's not on the roadmap, it does not matter. So what you need to do as a CRO person is to always have the roadmap and see what kind of like is the plan for each sprint, what are the releases, what are the things that happen. And then based on your research and your data, to adapt your hypotheses based on whatever the fuck is happening that sprint. And for instance, let's say this sprint, they're releasing something that improves the homepage experience. Great. Look at your data and see what can you do on the homepage to help with those goals that you're trying to achieve. Don't try to create A/B tests or experiments that are outside of sprint because that's how you piss people off. So instead, look at what's the sprint plan from a product perspective, look at the releases, look at the development that they do, and try to incorporate stuff there because when you go in front of the stakeholder, they're going to be like, well, I just want to improve the homepage experience. What does this matter? Well, if you do this on the homepage, then it's also going to do this and that, which matters because we're trying to achieve this. So all of it has to be kind of in there.
And it relates to the buzzword stuffing that we talked about before, because if they're scanning through a test doc, a hypothesis, in their head, the thing that they're most interested in is homepage redesign, homepage blow up, whatever. And they scan your test doc and homepage is mentioned once. right? And it might be explicit or it might be implicit. They might explicitly tell you, this doesn't target the homepage, so I don't want to do this. But they might also implicitly be like, I don't want to do this, not tell you. And then that's on you to like have done that homework beforehand or do the homework after that to figure out, well, what is it that they're actually looking for? Your hypotheses might actually be great, but they suck because they're not targeting the business. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I've seen so many CROs that absolutely have no idea what a product roadmap is or how it looks like. And like, how are you in CRO if you don't look at the product roadmap?
We don't judge. They're doing their best.
No, I judge. Like, and listen, I love you. Listen to this voice. Listen to this soothing Eastern European voice. I love you. But if you're working in experimentation related to product, just look at the product roadmap. That is where all your answers lie. And also talk to your developers. Give them a hug. Okay, I'm done.
We need to get you on like some CRO ebooks doing some
readings. With this voice. I only look good on radio. I don't sound good. Cool. But yeah, so I think the issue with hypothesis is like it's like three parts of a hypothesis, or maybe more. I don't know. Let's see where I'm going with this. You have the formula, like how you're writing it down. You have your data. You have your business context, right? But all of these need to kind of like make sense together, because it doesn't matter if you're using best practices for formulating a hypothesis and you use Craig Sullivan's formula for hypothesis, which I still do, by the way. I love you, Craig. But like, it's not enough to have that template. You also kind of need to use data. So what I've noticed, and I want to ask you your opinion here, what I've noticed is that the way we source data, or the places that we source data to come up with hypotheses, are old school and played out as fuck. It's not just the how you write it, and it's not just the business context, it's also the data sources. Where are we taking information to inform our hypothesis?
You talked about Craig Sullivan's hypothesis toolkit. I'll shout out Erin Weigle's hypothesis toolkit as well in her book. They're both similar. They're both a little different. They're both very good though. And this is where like, these are the ingredients to the hypothesis, and let's just run through them quickly. So for Craig's version of the hypothesis toolkit, it's 3 macro buckets: theory, validation, and outcome. The theory is like the data part, and it's like your educated guess. We believe based on data, something will change for a population and will cause an impact. But the theory is an educated guess. I think that's where most people stop. And that's where you have shitty hypotheses. Your hypothesis is an if-then statement, which if you're doing that, that's fantastic. But you could do better than that. So validation is the next piece after theory, which is the if-then statement. Or I guess it's the then part of it. It's we will see a metric go up or down, or feedback improve or not improve or whatever. And the outcome, which is linked with the business. This is what will happen on the business side, that we'll see massive improvements on the business side. I wanted to lay that out because, Juliana, your framework adds a couple extra pieces, like the, why this matters, that I think is another layer of this. But let's put this into practice. Say, maybe you can give an example of like a hypothesis that you would frame in kind of a framework.
Sure.
Like
I mean, it's not necessarily how I frame it. It's kind of like what I add next to it, right? So actually, you might not remember this, but you are the person that actually taught me about solutions and problem statements. I mean, I use them in product, but I never use them in CRO. So what I did is kind of took your thing and went a bit further, like more in a data businessy type of way. So for instance, I have a hypothesis, just reading here. Improving navigation will provide users with a clearer path to key content, resulting in increased engagement, lower bounce rates, and higher conversion, right? So this is my hypothesis. The problem statement here, and this is the second thing I add next to it, is like navigation is unclear and inconsistent, making it difficult for users to explore key areas and engage with content effectively. Okay, so what's the solution for this? Add the persistent horizontal navigation bar with breadcrumbs and ensure it's optimized based on user intent. And a practical example, this is another column. What's a practical example of this? Like, I noticed that clients love this stuff. You have the hypothesis, you have the solution, you have the problem statement. But like, how does this look in practice? I think what we don't realize is when we create a hypothesis, is we tend to go very sciencey with it. I used to do that so much. And make sure that I have all the statements and this change is good for stakeholders and so on. Like I was so like rigid, right? And I realized that a lot of times, and I used to write like long ass hypotheses, and I realized that clients don't really give a shit. They just want to know what does this look in practice. So I have this practical example column, and I say here, Adding a regular navbar menu on the homepage that leads to your core marketing pages that is available at all times for a user can aid navigation and user experience. And then the client is like, oh, this makes sense. Sure. And then I have this column that you like. Why does this matter, right? Why does this matter? So what I said here is like a clear navigation structure will guide users to critical areas and help reduce drop-offs and help them make progress on the homepage, because this is a homepage test. And that's it, And then, of course, I have the page, the type of experiment, overarching goal or goals, audience, success metrics, and so on. But these parts here are very important. So I think the two things that I use that I learned from a commercial perspective is the practical example column and why does this matter, where I put it in the most super plain terms.
It's really interesting because I think your way of building out hypotheses is the same basic core that Craig outlined, but all you're doing is breaking out some of the fields into further information and adding more context. You took out the, why does this matter? That's a separate box that could kind of be related to the theory part of it, I guess, or the impact part of it, whatever. But you're breaking it out into its own box, and that's making it explicit. It forces you to think about your tests in a different way. And I think that's something else that I think a lot of people skip the critical thinking in hypotheses. A hypothesis shouldn't be just like a fucking hate this, I don't want to do this, do it, check it off, I did the thing, move on. I want to build the test. The hypothesis is the strategy part of everything that you're doing. If you spend 30 seconds on building your hypotheses, your experimentation program probably sucks. Because where are you putting your critical thinking if you're not spending time in the hypothesis generation? And the hypothesis generation includes all the ingredients of here's the data behind it. Here's how we are linking our experimentation with the business and what they're looking for. Your hypotheses suck because you aren't spending time improving on the inputs to make your hypotheses better.
The hypothesis is the only thing that is client friendly. Because if you start talking about MDE calculation and p-value and all that, nobody cares. This is the only chance you have as a CRO practitioner to speak the same language as your stakeholder or client. So if you are not putting the effort into these 3 lines or 4 or 5 lines, you're going to lose it. Because when they go next to calculate MDE and mismatch or whatever standard deviation, I'm sorry, but you lost them.
You just had to plug your podcast name in here, didn't you?
Why not? But yeah, no, that's so true. Hypothesis is the only abstraction you have to the complexity of what A/B testing is.
Maybe we need a different word for it, because I guess in theory, a hypothesis is just your educated guess if-then statement. What we're doing is we're expanding the definition of hypothesis to include a bunch of other inputs and then calling it a hypothesis. When instead, is it really at that point a hypothesis, or is it something else? Because a problem statement, I think, should be part of hypothesizing, but maybe it's not the hypothesis. You know what I mean? So this is more of a generic, this is your pre-test thinking, which isn't a sexy word, but spend more time strategizing pre-test and figuring out all of your available inputs, the business, the data behind it. These are things that it's your pre-test analysis. That's probably your problem. You might push that on your hypothesis to be your hypotheses suck. And that's a symptom of the problem. The problem's really your pre-test strategy sucks.
True.
Right?
True. I do like the solution, way of framing it. But the thing is that you don't know if it's a solution, right? Yet. It's a pre-solution. I don't know. I do think, hypothesis might not encompass all that a business is today. I think for sure in the medical field where this comes from, or the science field, for sure, some things will stay the same. And, you come up with a hypothesis and then you test it and then you write your research paper about it and so on. It's very hard right now to draw the equal sign between what's happening in the science world and in clinical trials with the modern businesses today, and it's kind of doesn't fit the mold necessarily anymore.
I think that's a whole broader conversation around are CROs actually scientists? I don't want to get into that. That's worth its own episode. I do want to go into a couple other topics related to this. So in the hypothesis that you framed, as you were talking through your hypothesis, I was writing a note I don't know if you're tactical enough in your hypothesis. And then when you wrapped up ending with this, the why or so what piece of it, I was actually, you were tactical. the reason I was challenging myself or asking myself that question for your hypothesis, you said, if we like improve the navigation, we'll see these things. And I'm like, to me, improved navigation isn't tactical enough. To me, the hypothesis has to describe the exact change of what you're doing. It's not, we're going to make the navigation easy and friendly and blah, blah. It's like, we are going to add a hover state and add underlines, and we're going to make it time out by 2 seconds rather than 0.1 second so it stays sticky. Like, whatever that is, that change should be explicitly laid out. And that's probably, I see a lot of hypotheses where it's like, if we make sticky CTA, we will improve conversion rate. It's like, I guess technically that's a hypothesis, but a sticky CTA is technically the change. But like, what are you making sticky? You don't have to go like, it's going to be 20 pixels tall and it's going to like, you don't necessarily have to go so tactical into like the engineering part of and the design part of all of it. But it should be enough that a human can understand what you're doing without a photo.
100%. I love this question, or I guess observation, because it's not necessarily a question. I used to have all the tactical stuff in the hypothesis before, like to the T. I was even creating the variant and scorecards of it. Like, I used to do all this stuff in slides before. The thing is that I'm getting to it at the end. Why? Because I'm painting a picture. If you do so much cognitive load on one hypothesis, and I used to write like long ass hypothesis, I still have to. For some clients, they prefer it like that. But for somebody that, for a company, and most companies nowadays are either in product, the CRO function exists in product, but marketing is a place where it happens. In the marketing department, if you do CRO, shit is fast. So nobody, it's like enter meme. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't no damn body that's gonna read your long ass hypothesis. I am on purpose broad when I start about the navigation. And then once I lock the why it matters, then is when I practically tell them what is the change and how we can do the change. And I calculate the A/B test and so on. But it's kind of like taking people on a journey. And the reason why I do this, and I mentioned it earlier, is that a hypothesis, it's an abstraction of the hard work that an A/B test means. From a data perspective, from a statistics perspective, from an implementation perspective. The clients don't give a fuck about that. They care about how can this make them more money or bring them more clients or whatever. So I spend so much time painting the picture and explaining what I'm gonna do and what's the impact, and less time on like the specific stuff. And it works better.
Okay, I want to reinforce this. I think this is a fucking fantastic point. Your hypothesis should reflect how much work went into building out that theory.
Yes, the research, yes.
If you have a hypothesis that's like, if sticky CTA, then bags of money, that's a dog shit hypothesis. No one will ever be interested in it. But your hypothesis should be a reflection of how much work went into research, designing it, figuring out how the tactical execution will be, linking up the hypotheses with the business. If you spend more time in a hypothesis, it's a reflection of how good your experimentation program is at sowing the seeds and like spreading the tentacles.
Preach.
Oh, I thought you said rich. I was like, yeah, and I'm poor, but like spreading the tentacles and like sinking your teeth into every function and figuring out this is a thing that has touched everything and everyone in a positive way, consensually, into understanding into everything. Yes, I am totally aligned with that. I want to push a little bit more in some people might push back. And you brought up this example of marketing. And like marketing is trying to move quickly, understandable. I mean, everyone's trying to move fast. Very few people want bottlenecks. A lot of what we're talking about is costly in terms of time, meaning you have to spend an hour or 30 minutes or whatever amount of time strategizing a hypothesis. I think we understand the value. But some people might be like, why am I spending an hour writing a hypothesis when it'll take me 30 minutes to build the test? I'm curious if you could play both sides of the coin here, or maybe I could play the other side of the coin. What position are you at that some people might say, this is so much time and effort spent onto this bullshit thing? What would you say to someone who's like, we're spending too much time hypothesizing and not enough time testing?
I don't think it's like the quantity of time, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, that a hypothesis needs to be business ready. I think it's actually having all the data from your client and context from your client to know how to frame it in the best way that makes sense for them.
I agree. I think what you're doing is you're saying, don't attribute time to the hypothesis writing, attribute time to like the research part. So the hypothesis writing is quick, but it's because the time isn't in the hypothesis, the time is somewhere else. You're still objectively spending the same amount of time, which you should be doing.
Please do research.
Agree. Hot take.
Spicy take. Don't start me, please. Okay, so if you do research, and you should do research, and if you have good discovery and communication with your client or your internal stakeholders, you won't spend extra time to write a better hypothesis or positioning that hypothesis to be better. It's basically just using the data that you have. You don't need to do all the research, and then, in the last moment before you have to show it to your client or stakeholders, like, oh shit, I need to spend 3 hours to write six rows, and you're freaking out and chat GPT that shit. And I'm like, yo, no, you're already doing this stuff. Like, this is your research. It's an abstraction of your research.
So I think we go back to that same problem where if your hypothesis isn't strong, and strong to us is like when you don't have a problem statement, you don't have research in the hypothesis or remotely related to it, you're proposing a very basic if change then money, effectively. If you spent the time to move towards that, there's probably some words, like we mentioned way earlier on, there's some buzzwords and other things you should inject in that hypothesis based on your audience, because that will help you get that buy-in, and that'll help create trust that what you're doing is incredibly valuable because you've thought through everything. Maybe, this is probably a trust thing in CRO, that people don't trust CRO programs when they see your hypothesis is basic. When they see that you haven't done the work, it's reflected in the hypothesis. And we went back, like, your hypothesis should be a reflection of how hard you worked on getting to that point. You might not be getting test ideas approved. Your hypotheses might be a couple sentences and people won't approve it. People won't trust your program. They'll defer to, we're just going to do it. It's implicit behaviors based on not presenting yourself with the confidence in the data and showing that you actually did the hard work,
Yeah, and don't forget, it's not only the research and the pretest stuff that you do, but it's actually what data you get from discovery. I cannot stress this enough. Like, it doesn't matter if you come up with the best A/B test of your life, with the best data and the best research and the best hypothesis, but if that hypothesis is disconnected from what the client is aiming to achieve, like, you might get a client as an agency that wishes that in Q4 they increase, I don't know, AOV and the new customer rate to 2% or 2. They have the goals, they have OKRs, they have KPIs. And if you do something great, that you notice something in the research that has nothing to do with it, and you would get excited, and I get it, I am you. And you go to customer, oh shit, I just found this is the best thing ever. Let's do this right now. And the client is like, this is great, but have you not been listening to me for the last month? Like, my job,
which decreases trust in your program.
My job
100%.
Depends on getting these 3 things because, OKRs are coming. They're going to charge my ass. That's where you're supposed to be, like a trusted advisor. But that's, again, discovery, baby. Discovery and making notes.
The last thing I want to end on before we go over to the next section is every test should have a bunch of metadata. So that can be like devices, pages targeted, audience targeted, hypothesis, explicit hypothesis, problem statement, data to back. There can be a bunch of metadata. I'm formulating the thought here that based on your audience, you might want to literally reach into the bucket of metadata and pull different things for your hypothesis, because that's the easiest way for you to frame that out and have that data available for leaders or engineers, designers, anyone who wants to have that. I think as a broader thought process around experimentation is, don't be afraid for your test to have a shit ton of metadata. And that's why I love Airtable, and shout out to Airtable if you guys want to sponsor me. But that's why I love Airtable, because you could add so much metadata to every individual test. It's incredibly powerful that you could have different views, and you can even auto-generate reports based on all that stuff. That's why I really appreciate that tool for what it does, and other tools do the same thing. It's not unique to Airtable, but Airtable's free. You can do a lot of stuff free, so that's why I advocate for it for junior CROs. I'm coming to a conclusion that there's specific boxes of metadata that will be important to the hypothesis generation. And maybe it's like your hypothesis scorecard. What's included in the hypothesis card? What are the explicit things? For me, it's going to be, and the metadata you should populate for every single test. I'm not really going to go in order. I'm kind of just spouting them. But I think it starts with research behind the test with links to that research, problem statement with some links towards the business KPIs that will be impacted, your explicit hypothesis, which an if-then statement, if that's where you have your if-then statement and the surrounding data around that, beautiful. I think that's fine. Or it's if change and be tactical in your change, then metric will go up, or behavior that will be impacted. That's how I would write the hypothesis. And then the metric piece is like the thing that we will see is this is success, this is failure. Those are kind of like the probably 6 or 7 buckets. The why. I know you talked about the why, like why this matters. That's another box I would include as like maybe the bottom, put a box around it, put a ribbon around it. And like, this is the thing you should pay attention to. What other things do you think could make a hypothesis card that you just share with people? You know what I mean? Like you could print it out and like literally hand it out to the product manager, be like, this is the test I want to run. Here's all the important shit you need to know about it.
I have 2 more columns that you didn't notice in my sheet, which I think are the best ones. So the first one is client notes, and the second one is my notes. So when I share the roadmap or do this with I genuinely did not do that on purpose. But when I share this to with the client, something I learned also, maybe in like the last year and a half, I share it as an editable file. I don't share it as a artifact. And basically on my notes, I write to them in plain words. I say, I did this research and I saw this and I think this would be good. Like this is a TLDR of what they're going to read and how I feel about it based on what they said. So it's like an actual conversation, like I would write to you a Slack message. And then I have the client notes. So when the client goes to this on their own leisure, you would think that they don't care, but they leave actual notes about each hypothesis. So for instance, I have a question like, oh, we are just doing this redesign on the homepage. Do you think this is going to affect SEO? So this gives me opportunity to show them how much I know about this because I did all the fucking research. So I have this open conversation with the client in the comments, which other people from the client side are going to see. It is so much better because it's not just me putting my shit down on a sheet. It's also the client's comments. And that's what gets people to work because, oh shit, so this guy said this. Well, I should probably listen. So it's not just me doing this, it's together. So I like to create this relationship with the client where we're both working on the hypothesis and we're both working on the solutions.
I love this. Absolutely critical as part of the thing. I mentioned kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, here's your test card to give to someone. And like, this is the test I want to run. I'm going to actually take that back because I think giving that person a card to your second point of like, it's not editable. It has to be living, breathing. Because if it's a card and it's like, here's the test I'm running, that could be perceived as, well, what if I want to change or anything or tweak it? So it's like, you're not valuing my input. It's CRO yelling at person to run test rather than this is our thing. So I love that. That's the why it matters. It's not explicitly make it editable versus not. It's you're showing that we're working on this together. So making it editable, making it breathing, show a link and let people go in and change it. Beautiful. But not just that. I didn't even think about the client notes and the like Juliana notes. It shows that you're paying attention to their feedback and noting it down. A lot of this is trust building. So you're paying attention, you're taking it down. Also low key, if they lie and they're like, I didn't say do this, You got receipts to say, fuck you, I told you. We talked about this. You saw the notes, you said this. So passive aggressively, it's receipts if someone's like, I didn't tell you to do that. And we're like, no, you bitch, you definitely told me to do that. More importantly, it is both of those things are the I am hearing you out. We're working on this collaboratively. And that's maybe the worst sign of a bad hypothesis is not actually like taking into account other people's thoughts, opinions.
And the cool part is that I don't tag them or like involve them in the calculation and test running part at all. Like that's completely separated.
It's too nerdy for them.
It's not even that it's nerdy. It's just that they're more interested in the impact. You know, so like working with them on this abstraction part is going to help me afterwards fix those things. I know this is going to sound in a way, but like I never like all this hippo stuff that people are talking about. I never kind of got those that much. I mean, I do get some pushback for sure, especially if I work with like highly regulated industries. Remember, I was telling you like this happened to me before, but I get it, you know, like why would you risk your bank? Why would you do all this? Because I get it. But what matters the most for me is the relationship and the trust. And I really like put the client trust like right here, which makes me work like a maniac. But like, I don't want them to think that I don't listen to what they're coming. Yeah.
That's the foundational thing. And it's not explicitly client, agency relationship. It's stakeholder trust. Agreed. All right. That's a really great wrapping point for this part of the episode. So Juliana, what is it time for?
I forgot. Getting shit done? Showing them how it's done?
No, keep going.
Show them how to do the shit?
Keep going. You're close.
Figuring shit out. So it was something with shit.
Yes. Shit you need to know. Okay, this is the most... Okay, well, let's go.
Shit you need to know.
Let's go. So this week's Shit You Need to Know comes courtesy of a actual local certified homie, Haley Carpenter, who also lives in Austin, Texas.
Oh, she's so nice.
She's great. So she triggered me a little bit, but I think she offered some really solid advice. So it's basically this is her post. Someone came to her and said, "We recently launched a full redesign. Our conversion rates have tanked. Help us." It's a conversation she hears all the time. And her call out here is CRO optimization, research, data collection, analysis. It starts way before you start designing anything. The work is continuous through post-launch. CRO isn't like the surgery you get when you break your arm. CRO is strengthening your arm muscles so that when it breaks, you know it broke. You try your best to help it heal. It's not just like a sprinkle CRO dust and everything will go back to normal and be better. So I think it's pretty compelling to look at this from the redesign view, because what she's calling out is like people will walk up to her and be like, hey, or virtually walk up to her and be like, hey dude, my redesign fucking tanked. Sprinkle your CRO magic dust on it. And she's like, that's not how it works. We'll analyze and we'll try and do it, but you should have been doing this before. So I think it's a broader conversation around like CRO needing to be proactive rather than reactive, and the challenge that people treat CRO as a reactive thing rather than proactive. Any thoughts?
If you just do a redesign and you launch a new redesign, it's not only the CRO part, it's actually an SEO problem because you're fucking up your searchability and discoverability. And a lot of people think that they have a conversion problem where they actually have a searchability or discoverability. So when I say discoverability, I say you're writing on Google, I don't know, underwear that are sustainable, or period underwear, or whatever. So you do a search and then you get all the search results. So if your headline and the meta description doesn't fit the search and it doesn't prompt users to click, it means your discoverability is bad because your CTR is bad from search results. So this is something that is called meta description optimization, heading optimization, and so on. So when you're going through a redesign and you change pages on the website and you change URLs, that's an SEO problem. So the issue here, I think in my opinion, is even more in the back, is the isolation of CRO as a function versus being a part of a team that works with SEO, that works with marketing, that works with acquisition. Because if you know, for instance, that there is an issue with discoverability, then you can help the SEO person do better descriptions. And then you can improve the content on the page to match the intent. So the redesign problem with CRO, not really a CRO thing, even if you sprinkle dust on it.
Well, so I guess there's two redesigns, right? There's the design redesign, like literally lipstick on a pig kind of punch up where the messaging's the same, the val props are the same, everything is the same. It's just now instead of it being like, you know, one shade of blue, it's a different shade of blue. And instead of this component, it's a different component. And it's not explicitly URL changes. It's not explicitly copy changes. It's just a visual. I've been part of those that have also tanked, but it is important to break it out because if that's the case, the solution to both is the same. CRO involved way fucking early on in that process, but I think it's interesting to break it out that if you do a wholesale site redesign, and that's a site architecture redesign, in that case, I'm not sure how, who talked to Haley in that specific case. I'm sure we've seen this before where like someone's going to come to you and exactly like you described, it's the quality of traffic coming to your site from the SEO that's changed. They're not going to address the quality piece of that they totally fucked. They're like, well, just sprinkle CRO magic dust. Here's the traffic. It's totally different. Their intent's way fucking lower. CRO can and should help, but it's more than CRO.
At some point you can't. Some people are beyond, or some things are beyond help. Yeah.
Well, this is the part where Shiva had an analogy and he's cut it out because it made no sense. So it's chopped out. It's forever lost. No one's ever going to hear it.
You see, then your soundboard. Can you hire me as a soundboard? I can make weird sounds.
I can offer you certified for me to be homie stickers as payment.
I wish.
I'm sorry. I couldn't offer you certified for me to be homie sticker as payment indefinitely.
A singular one. But no, yeah, I get it, and I get where Haley's coming from. And yeah, like there's a lot of sides to the coin, but like in defense to our clients and companies and stakeholders, I will say that sometimes you are being pushed by your leadership to go through this stuff and you have no choice. And I've been there. And I think, like at the end of the day, for sure, it sucks. Your stuff will tank, but it's a good lesson. So next time you know how to do better. So like, don't down yourself.
And sometimes they don't even know. Like sometimes you don't even are aware that you could fuck your SEO up. You could fuck your CRO up. So I think part of it is, as much as we want to be like the I told you so guy, not helpful. And that's not the time. Like if you just get into a car accident or something, and then the first thing that someone tells you is like, well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have been going 10 miles over the speed limit. It's like, that doesn't help me at all. You're probably right, but that doesn't help me right now do the thing I need to do. So as a CRO, I think you should be as helpful as you can.
And validate people's feelings and acknowledge them. Sometimes you don't need a solution. Sometimes you just want to know that it's okay to feel as you feel. And that's it,
I think as much as Haley is talking about on the education side, trying to let people know, be careful and involve CRO before you have the issues, because they will help protect and help you optimize from there. So it's like stretching. Just like as we get older as human beings, we should stretch. And I
haven't had a good stretch in years. It was like 2 years ago when I had a good one.
Some people haven't had a good CRO strategy session. That analogy's fire. I killed it, Shiva. Good job.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. All right. We're getting fucking unhinged. We got to wrap this up, Juliana. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. I think this was great. I think there's some really tactical, tangible things we could take away from on how to better write hypotheses and or pre-test analyses and conduct them in a better way. Anything you want to plug? Any dope shit you're working on besides, standard deviation podcasts you have with Simo?
Just go on julianajackson.com. I write, I post on LinkedIn. I just do stuff on the internet. That's it.
It's funny. So Aaron has a website, aarondoesthings.com, and then Sani, I think he stole it. I think that's apt to say he stole it. So Sani has a sanidoesthings.com website. I think we all just have to make a Shiva Does Things website, Juliana Does Things website. We just have to have a Do Things stuff. Website.
Yeah,
for everyone.
No, I get it. No, I just, go on Juliana minus Jackson, but not in practice, and just, see what happens, see what I'm up to.
You have some really great blog articles that you've been writing and you're spending a shit ton of time on with tactical takeaways and really interesting things to think about. I'll plug a couple of those articles in the description too. Perfect. Juliana, thank you so much for joining us.
Gracias, and thank you too. I don't know why I said gracias, it just felt...
So we're just going to end there.